Each day this week, I would like for us to take an imaginary trip through a child's playground. Every day, I want us to examine one particular piece of playground equipment, and this equipment will then be used to suggest some vital lessons that apply especially to those who are children of God. As we begin this trip through the playground, let's notice first the seesaw. We see some children going up and down on the seesaws, and we're reminded of life's struggles between two opposing and warring forces. Within each individual, there are two forces that contend earnestly for dominance. We think about the studies that have been done in psychology and psychiatrics that focus upon these two forces upon the individual. Now, on the one hand, there's the spiritual man, but on the other hand, there's the carnal man. You may remember the story that was written by Robert Louis Stevenson about a man named Dr. Jekyll, who occasionally would turn into Mr. Hyde, in which he described in a very fascinating way the life of a man who at times was influenced by the beneficent Dr. Jekyll in his nature, and at other times was controlled by the evil and murderous Mr. Hyde in his nature. One philosopher, alluding to the two natures within man, said, "Two souls, alas, dwell apart in my breast." Now, the Bible speaks of the two opposing and warring natures within the human, and while it was not the only point the Apostle Paul was making in the 7th and 8th chapters of Romans, it certainly was taught there. For instance, in Romans 7 and verse 19, here the Apostle says, "For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do." While Paul was not talking exclusively about himself, but about all of us, he himself was included in this statement. As great as Paul was, he was not perfect or sinless. The only one to ever live a perfect life was Christ. Paul was human just as we are, and this internal warfare between the two opposing and warring natures raged within him as well as within us. In this verse, I think Paul spoke of a frustration that is experienced by all who are trying to live for Christ. Our actions don't always run consistent with what we believe and preach. We're sometimes inconsistent people. The good that we want to accomplish, we often leave undone, and the evil that we abhor at times overcomes us, and we're found to be participants in them. But the seesaw reminds us that spirituality and carnality are opposites, and that one goes up against the other. One goes up as the other goes down. On a seesaw, one seat rises as the other falls. And that's the way with the internal struggle fought within man. When a person is becoming more spiritual, and this is the case if he's a Christian, the carnality within him should be diminishing. But if one is growing in carnality, his spirituality is found to be on the decline. They can't both be on the increase or both be decreasing at the same time. One rises while the other falls. If the nature that was falling reverses its direction and starts rising, then the other nature automatically changes direction too and begins to fall. I want you to listen to these words from Romans chapter 8. "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be." Well, the next several verses find the inspired writer continuing along this same vein, in this same thought. And while it's important that we're aware of the fact that a war rages within us between carnality and spirituality, it's also imperative that we understand what spirituality is. Some confuse spirituality with emotion and ecstatic feelings. Some equate spirituality with worship devotionals conducted in the dark and accompanied by hand-holding and testimonies of what they feel the Lord has done for them. Some falsely believe that spirituality is a superiority complex, The feeling that he or she is closer to God and more acceptable than others. Well, as Paul suggested in one of the verses that I read just a few moments ago, people are carnal when they are not subject to the laws of God. People are spiritual when they are subject to His laws. The more that one complies with divine law, the more spiritual that person becomes. And to defeat this carnal nature and grow spiritually, man must keep the will of God. But first, we have to know what that will is. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.